Hello.
Oh, hi there.
Hi, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm not too bad. How's your day been so far, Rick?
Not bad at all. I had a concert last night and I drove back and got back about, 3 o'clock this afternoon. So it's been really good.
Yeah, just lounging around a little bit.
I beg your pardon?
Oh, I just meant relaxing a little bit.
Oh, yeah, just, the trouble is you're only away for a day and you come back and things have sort of piled up. There's loads of messages and people who want things answered and whatever. So it's but it's relaxing. It's nice. I mean, I'm not working tonight, which is nice. So that I can be home and it gives my wife a chance to remember what I look like.
Yeah, well, living on the road's got to be funny like that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, actually, the first question I had was, since the world has changed so much since you had your original run with Yes and became like a real
Yeah.
worldwide, like incredibly well-known musician on the world stage, and the world within the music industry has changed so much. I just wondered, after 4 decades of just being one of the most well-respected musicians in the history of rock and roll, that's still consistently putting out albums and consistently touring, what do you think is one of the core elements, not just necessarily in your music, but in music in general, that still has people coming back to rock and roll in an unforgettable way, or even representing what most people would consider to be rock music in a classical context now?
I think a lot of it's down to generations. Uh, I mean, the interesting thing is, I mean, I talk to this, with my kid. I've got six kids, and the eldest is 47, and they go down to 30, and most of them play instruments. Well, my son Oliver played with Yes for 2 years, and Adam, his brother, who's slightly younger, he's 45. I mean, he's been with Ozzy Osbourne for 17 years now. My daughters play, and I talk to them about this, and it's interesting. One of the observations is they say, it's interesting for you, Dad, because you can remember when rock and roll was born. I mean, you can sort of say, around the Bill Haley, skiffle things and times like that. They said, so you could put a date on things. And they said, as generations have gone on, nobody puts a date on anything anymore. The music is either great or it isn't. You either like it or you don't. And one of the interesting things is that musicians, and I mean a lot of young musicians, I get a lot, they come to the shows and talk, and they're interested in the history of the industry that they've joined. They're interested in how music got, how they're able to make music, how it got to that stage, what happened before that may have subconsciously influenced them, or the different ways of recording and what has happened. And a lot of them will go back, and it's the same with, they'll look back on some of the instruments that we used to and say, hey, I want to try that, I want to do that. And it's shown it even more so in the last couple of years, because I can't obviously speak for Canada, but I can certainly speak for the UK. Vinyl is now outselling CDs.
Yeah, it's the same way over here too.
It's interesting. Now, and what's interesting is I speak to a lot of people who are buying vinyl, and they're saying, well, the thing is, we didn't. A lot of people didn't even know it existed. They had no idea it existed, because there was a very, what I call a bad period of time, which was mainly in the 80s. It started, which is where manufacturers of hardware for music told us that, for example, the CD replaced the album, the vinyl. You don't want that anymore. You need a CD. And then we're told, downloading is streaming. That's replacing your CDs and things. And what's happened now, and it's a lot of the new generations that are starting to go, no, hold on a minute. No, we don't like this word replacement. We prefer the word addition. We prefer you to say, hold on a minute. We've got an option here of 4 or 5 or 6 ways that we can listen to our music. And we may want to listen to them off of different formats at different times. it's easy to take an iPod with us with 500 tunes. We want to take that on the holiday. That's easy. But if we're at home, how nice would it be to take the album off the shelf and have a look to see who's on it, and then play it? So we've got that tactile thing as well, and it's very interesting in this country again as well. People have started producing cassettes again, because we have quite a silly situation. Don't ask me why it's happened. I think I was told 55% of the cars still on the road in Britain have cassette players in them. and sometimes cassette players as part of a CD player as well in there. So people go, hold on a minute. So they started to produce cassettes again. And it's fantastic. There's now options. And I think that is, thankfully we've lost this dreaded word replacement. It is the same with the musical instruments. I know a lot of young musicians who've gone back and are discovering a lot of the old vintage synths and the vintage keyboards that were around, and they're loving them.
Oh, yeah.
And that is so healthy. That is so good. And I think we have these generations that don't like this replacement word. There is an interesting thing, though, about new music, because I've always looked upon music as the first thing that anybody actually owns for themselves. When you're a kid, because if you think when you're, 12, 13, 14, 15, even 16 years old, you are very reliant upon your parents or whoever brings you up. They decide what you're going to wear, they decide what school you go to, they decide what you're going to eat. They pay for everything. And you are stuck that they are playing. So once you discover your own music, that's the first thing that you own. They can't stop you doing that. And there is nothing better than any kid likes into this day of hearing where they've got their own music. Hear those wonderful words coming up the stairs. Horrible racket off. That's brilliant. That means that's mine. So there's always this thing of a new generation, that they something that's going to out of what their parents had. But what's interesting, get about 10 years down the line, then they'll look back on that and go, hey, some good stuff there. I mean, I can remember, for example, in the 80s when it absolutely killed prog and various other things like that. And the young kids went, oh, great, this is it, this is ours, this is whatever. And I mean, I'm great friends with a lot of the guys like the Jam and all that kind of stuff. And they said, we loved all the prog rock, but it wasn't for us, but we loved it. But we couldn't say that because the fans would have go, you can't like that. And but then 10 years further down the line, the next generation look back and go, hey, there's some really good stuff there. And that's what's really healthy now. You can you can listen to most radio stations and you'll hear such an eclectic mix of music. Here in 1 minute, then Led Zeppelin, then it's not impossible to sort of hear Sinatra or something. It's so wonderful that music doesn't have a date stamped on it anymore.
No, and that's a really excellent point I think you raised, just because not only is it incredibly relevant, but it's becoming bigger. And even just to speak to the point you made about synthesizers, like now there's that whole like subgenre of electronic music called synthwave with a lot of musicians, including guys like Perturbator and stuff like that are using old school instruments and merging it with digital recording technology. So you really get these
that's right. Do you know
amazing best of both worlds.
What's great about that as well is they're getting these old instruments and they're finding things to do with them that we never did in the original days because we moved on to the next thing. So there's always new things to do with a lot of these old synths, and they're finding great ways of doing it too.
Yeah, a lot of room for rediscovery. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned the resurgence of vinyl as well, because I completely agree with it. And I think another big attraction to vinyl, at least for the 21st century and a lot of the fans that have come along with it, is that it's such a completely immersive experience on every level, whether it's just like the combination
Yeah,
of the lyrics with the artwork on the gatefold, as well as the fact that you actually have to sit down and listen to a whole album. You can't skip around. It's a really experience, and it's a really big
yeah, absolutely.
storytelling opportunity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I've found that's interesting is the number of people who, I say, I talk to them and they might have a vinyl under there. I say, oh, yeah, you're collecting a vinyl. They go, well, no, we've got the CD, we've got the vinyl, and we've downloaded it as well.
Hmm.
Because that's, because depending on where we are and what we're doing, it's really useful.
Oh, absolutely, and
Yeah, and it's really, I think we're a very healthy era. I think that the manufacturers, I think record companies, I'll be honest with you, I think they got it terribly wrong in the 80s and 90s by keep telling us that, oh, it's replacement, rather than, hey, here's another way you can do that.
yeah, exactly.
And I think it's taken time, but they've suddenly caught up now.
Yeah, well, and at the same time, too, in the age of the internet we're in right now, there is so much material out there now, not just throughout
Oh,
history, but with independent acts being able to release their own music on the online, etc., that it's almost just
yeah.
overwhelming to the point where I have to agree with what your kid said about, like, well, it's just, I don't care what year it's from or what genre you want to call it. It's just whether it attracts
Yeah,
you to
right.
it or not, right? Because you don't really have time to
Yeah,
necessarily filter it in all of those different ways rather than focusing on
yeah,
what it really has to offer.
yeah. And I think the other thing as well is that it's enabled. I mean, I've often said that not every musician aspires to be international,
Mm-hmm.
but the way that you can make music now and you can produce music, you can do it. There is no reason why you can't find musicians, and they're doing it, finding their level. It might be a local level, it might be a county level.
Mm-hmm.
They might break out a little bit more, and it might give them the opportunity to, for their music to reach maybe a big independent or something like that. So there's a wonderful pyramid that you can work your way up through.
Yeah, and kind of just to the point you mentioned earlier about for the listeners and the audience, it's having that amount of options at your disposal as a musician as well. So it's a two-way street
Yeah,
rather than it being a one-way conversation, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the next big question I really had for you was not just how you managed to arrive on selecting the songs as well as which arrangements you chose to focus on for the new album, but the one thing I really wanted to try to dig at and get your thoughts on were, as your chops and songwriting abilities as a musician have evolved, and especially as a live performer over the years, how did you really kind of approach seeing every new album, especially this one, not just as a process of rediscovery, but as a storytelling opportunity, as a chance to let your writing and composing and lyricism evolve as well as the musicianship itself and kind of reflect each other and that growth within that?
I'm I'm quite good at focusing. When I start on a project, I can bring the blinkers in. I can focus solely on it, not get detracted. And I spend a lot of time preparing before I do an album of how I see it's going to look, almost like creating a storyboard.
Yeah,
And one of
exactly.
the things with this album was the tunes had to be were really, really important. And melodies, to me, the sign of a good melody, if it's taken from a song, that if you hear the melody without the words, you know what the song is.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is the sign of a real strong melody. Of course, there's some instrumental pieces and that as well. And if you've got a good melody, then you can do variations on that melody, which is what I like, which is what I really like doing. I don't particularly care whether it's 5 years old, 5 minutes old, or 500 years old. If it's a good melody, it's what we were talking about earlier. It's good. It shouldn't have a date stamped on it.
Absolutely.
Then once I sort of selected, I had a short list of about 42, which we got down to 12 eventually, and which we'd like to try and get a nice mixture of different kinds of music, but all with a similar style. They were all, I wanted them all to be piano pieces, but with little splashes of colour here and there, just to enhance them, to enhance the piano. And I worked on the principle of the track "Morning Is Broken" that I did with Cat Stevens.
Mm-hmm.
When it's interesting when people say, about the piano on "Morning Is Broken," there's the impression that the piano plays all the way through. It doesn't. It just plays the little interludes between the verses and just one or two little flourishes. That's all. That's all it does. But the impression is there that it's all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to give that impression with this album that the string orchestra and the choir were sort of almost there, but all the time. But they're not. They're only there in little splashes. But the impression is that it is a piano, an orchestra. I didn't want it to be where I recorded the piano pieces and then did orchestrations where they just played all the way through over the top, like arrangements. I didn't want that. I wanted the orchestra, piano, and choir all to be one. So I wrote all the parts out as one, so I could see, like a pattern, how it would work. And I actually recorded it in a slightly strange way. What I did a demo for my own benefit of how I wanted the pieces and mapped it all out. I then wrote the orchestrations in the little places that I wanted all the orchestrations. I then went into the studio and recorded the piano. So I recorded the piano knowing full well where the orchestrations were going to be. So that stopped me, for example, overplaying in some places where I knew the orchestral part or the choir part were going to be important. So it was like a jigsaw of the pieces where I knew what all the other parts were going to do when I recorded the piano. Then I went into the studio and recorded the strings, and then we did the choir. And the only other additive that came in was on Bohemian Rhapsody, which after I'd recorded it, I sent it to Brian May, because Brian is one of my closest friends.
Oh, for sure.
I just wanted to know what he thought about it, because Brian, we were very close mates.
Mm-hmm.
And he was lovely. He came back about half an hour later and said, "Rick," he said, "I absolutely love this." He said, "If Freddie were alive, he would have absolutely adored this."
Right.
He said, "The only thing is," he said, "I think it needs a bit of classical flamenco guitar right towards the end." And I said, "Where do you mean?" And he pointed it out, and I looked it up on the computer. I went, "That's right, I'll get that done." He said, No, send it to me. I want to do it.
Oh, wow.
He did this wonderful little cameo bit at the end of Bohemian Rhapsody, which is absolutely perfect.
Yeah, you can't ask for higher praise than that. And just to wrap things,
absolutely.
Just to wrap things up, the final question I had was, with all of the amazing artists that you've collaborated with over the years, like Cat Stevens, like Brian May, and even with some artists that have either retired recently, like Black Sabbath, or have unfortunately passed away, like David Bowie, what really inspires you to continue to push on as an artist yourself, while having the ability to reflect on all of the experience you have as a way to help push yourself forward after your friends kind of go their own separate way, one way or another?
I think the answer to that is I am just totally in love with music. And I feel seriously blessed that I have the opportunity or some small talent that enables me to do it and create something that's inside of me, in my heart and my head, And I suppose I'm also very aware that as the years go by, you wonder, gosh, how much longer have I got to do this? I mean, I had the honour, but also the sadness of doing John Law's eulogy.
Yeah.
And I stood by his coffin and delivered the eulogy.
Because that only had to be a couple years ago.
And I just couldn't help think, I wonder what music John's taken with him.
Yeah.
Because I've actually got written in my will that on my tombstone or whatever, it's going to be written, it's not fair, I haven't finished yet.
Amazing.
My will to be written. And I think, do you know what? I think that goes for every artist and every composer and every musician, because you never finish.
No.
You never finish. And that is the joy of music.
And I think that is the perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for taking the time, Rick.
Listen, thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. I really appreciate it. And I'll make sure that I send the article to the label so they can put it on your website and your Facebook and all that good stuff. And yeah, best of luck with the tour. And I really look forward to hopefully catching you sometime either in Toronto or Detroit when you're on tour.
That's brilliant. I hope so too. Thank you very much.
Yo, my pleasure. Take care, and I'll see you later.